Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. So the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment is calling on the public to heed severe weather warnings after hundreds of motorists were trapped in disruptive snowfall at the weekend. For an update on the weather patterns in the country, let's bring in the Director of the School for Climate Studies at Stellenbosch University, Professor Guy Midgley, who joins us now via our video link. And Prof, great to see you once again. Thanks as always for making time for the SABC News channel. You know, as far as I can remember, the weather warnings were actually issued early last week, and yet we still found so many people being taken by surprise, especially on the N3. I wonder if you reckon anything else could have been done to sound the alarm about what lied ahead or lay ahead?
Well, that's a very good question. I think it's a question of trust. We need to really communicate to the South African public that we have one of the best weather services in the world, and certainly probably the best in Africa. And when our weather services issues a warning, they don't do it lightly. It means that something is very likely to happen, and they have different levels of threat and different levels of certainty. So their warnings are very carefully done, and we just need to trust our weather service more. If that could happen, and the communication, I'm pretty sure the communication is pretty good, we would really avoid a lot of these sorts of problems.
Yeah, because I mean, part of what caused the disruptions, especially on those main arteries, were the fact that people were completely taken by surprise. But a part of me, Prof, is a bit sympathetic. I mean, we're in the middle of September in the southern hemisphere of the world. You don't usually get snow at this time of the year, at least for us. And so I suppose the question becomes, what happened? What was the anomaly this time around?
Well, it's a very interesting event. Look, I want to say we shouldn't confuse weather with climate. Right. Climate is a long-term, average set of conditions, a range of conditions that one would normally expect. But weather, it can be very variable, and it can really catch you off guard if you don't know enough about it, or if you don't study it enough. And our weather services understands weather and weather variability quite well. And what happened was we had a lot of cold air south of the country, a lot of humidity in the atmosphere, and a particular set of wind conditions that fed in this cold air. These cold temperatures combined with these very high humidities, and we got snowfall, and that can happen. So, and the weather services have very good models that are able to predict these sorts of events days in advance. And this is a classic extreme weather event, probably enhanced by climate change because there's more humidity in the atmosphere, there's more wind energy, etc. But we need to trust our weather services because they're excellent at predicting these events.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, like I said, it was early last week when I first came across warnings that there's going to be very abnormally cold conditions, despite the fact that we're sitting at about 30 degrees a week before. But it does raise questions about whether or not we should kind of brace for these kinds of patterns in the future. And I know this has been seen as an anomaly. It's almost an exception to what we typically get. But is it time to brace for more of these kind of conditions, at least around springtime?
Well, it's over time. Temperatures will probably rise to 30 degrees again later today. So this was an extreme downturn in temperature. But this is the first way in which we, as people, are experiencing the impacts of climate change and will continue to experience the impacts of climate change. It's through the effects of these extreme weather events. This is the vanguard of climate change, the thing that we've been warning about as scientists since the 1980s and early 1990s more stridently. It has come to pass. We are now being visited with these climate extreme events as predicted over the long term. And this is how they happen. And we have to really get our houses in order to understand how to communicate and how to anticipate and respond. And it's a question of trust. It's a question of communication. And that is more of an art sometimes than a science, but we have to understand it, and very, very quickly.
Interesting you mentioned that it's more of an art than anything else, because I'm thinking how people who are involved in housing, for example, should respond. Architects, that's the word I'm looking for. Because, I imagine part of what the response should entail is actually just kind of curtailing how we live our lives.
Well, it's more than curtailing. It's the whole design of our urban environments have to take into account more and more the fact that we will have extreme water flows, flooding events. We have to be able to siphon that water off our urban surfaces as fast as we possibly can, faster than ever before. These extreme rainfall events, extreme cold snaps. These are all things that we can expect more and more of. And we're not powerless, and we're not without knowledge about these sorts of things. We've just got to wield it, carry on doing good science, because we keep on learning more and finding out more things. But yeah, this is something where we do need very, very good science, and we've got it in this country. One of the best in Africa, as I said, and one of the best in the world.
Yeah. In the past, actually, I saw that there were concerns around whether or not our, weather monitoring systems could get an upgrade, whether, in fact, it was time to think about investing more in order to improve the accuracy around how we make those early warning predictions. Is that valid, do you reckon? I mean, is there any credence to those reports?
It makes zero economic sense for this government not to invest in weather services. The payback on a rand of investment in weather services by the fiscus is probably between 5 and 20 rand to 1. So it makes no sense to save money by not investing in weather services. You're actually losing money. It is dumb. So it's really dumb. So there's some good economic analyses that show how short-sighted it is not to invest in weather services. Don't force weather services to earn their own money by selling climate data. It's a silly idea, because the payback is so much to the taxpayer and to the South African public. The fiscus should fund them, and fund them handsomely. And we will see the benefits, and we need those benefits. We really, really do in a time of climate change.
So, Prof, is there a funding deficit?
Absolutely, there's a funding deficit. Our weather services have been declining in several ways. Weather services really worked hard to introduce automatic weather stations to save the servicing costs, but they're more expensive. They have to be, they've got to be monitored. Instruments fail. When you're running hundreds and hundreds of weather stations, there's a significant cost to maintaining those instruments. And those are the instruments that give us these early warnings. Why are we not funding this to the fullest extent? It's crazy. The other issue, of course, is that Africa gets less than 3% of the global investment in climate change science, which is an appalling figure, given that Africa is not responsible for the climate change issue. That is also something that is very wrong, and our negotiators at these international forums need to be shaming the world into the fact that they really don't seem to care about African climate change science. They don't care. I mean, the evidence is clear. They don't care because they don't fund it. And as a consequence, African scientists are almost invisible on the climate change stage. So there's a lot of evidence to show that this is the case. It's wrong.
Absolutely. Plenty to think about, I suppose, as we take stock of what took place this weekend. Professor Guy Midgley, appreciate your time and your insights. Thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. The Prof is with the School for Climate Studies at Stellenbosch University.